Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Pastor PJ Aarsvold. I'm the campus pastor here at Renewal Church in the Highlands, and it is great to be with you. As AJ said, we're kicking off a new sermon series today, one that we are very excited about, and we are looking at the life of Joseph. Fun fact, both AJ and I's middle names are Joseph, and so that's why he's named after this Joseph. I'm named after Jesus' dad, Joseph. That's all not true. But our middle names are Joseph, so it's a special place in our heart. But in this series specifically, we're looking at triumph. Triumph is a really interesting word because it's a word, you think of victory, you think of winning, some sort of competition. But triumph also implies something great. It implies that there's some sort of obstacle to overcome. Like if you saw a chess grandmaster play a 10-year-old and destroy them, you wouldn't say wow, that guy really triumphed. You'd be that guy's a jerk and should check himself. No triumph. Triumph implies that there's something aspirational, there's something great. When you think of triumph, you think of somebody overcoming the odds, having to face great difficulty. And the reason that we're talking about triumph as a church is because each of us in our life is going to face obstacles, is going to face challenges that we can triumph over. Now, sometimes it's big, right? And sometimes it's little. Sometimes our lives don't look like we need to triumph. They're easy. Maybe right now you're in a season where, hey, things are going good, I'm happy, I'm content, and that's awesome. Praise the Lord for that. Sometimes, though, in life, we're going to face great difficulties. There are going to be points in life where you're going to find yourself thinking, I could never in a million years have imagined that this is what I would be doing, that this is what I would have to face, that I have to sort through all this, I have to go through all of this. All of us in life are going to face situations that are going to feel insurmountable, we're going to feel powerless against. And as a church, what we're reflecting on is how in those moments can there be triumph. And they can be big, right? Those situations, again, you're like, geez, what in the world? But even little triumphs, the little everyday challenges that we're so used to, that we overlook, that we fail to put up much of a fight. And so in this series, what we're going to be seeing is that we have a Savior, we have a Lord who triumphs for us, and that being with him and him in us, we then get to share in that triumph. Triumph over all the different challenges and obstacles in life, and ultimately triumph over death itself and all of the evil things in this world. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at triumph. And so to do so, we're going to be zooming in on the story of Joseph. Joseph is a great one. Some of us might be familiar with Joseph. Right? He's the whole Technicolor Dreamcoat play musical, so some of us are very familiar. Some of us might not be. Joseph is a very significant figure in the Bible, and he's a very significant figure in human history. He is somebody whose role is going to set up some of the foundations for what God is going to do throughout the rest of time, and even to this day. And Joseph is also great because when you look at his story, he's going to face some obstacles that I can't even imagine going through. But at the same time, there's a relatability that Joseph would face both big and small challenges, that he would have to lean on God and trust him to carry him through. And so that's what we're going to be looking at Joseph for this series to carry us through all the way up to about Palm Sunday and Easter. So this is our next month and a half or 2 months or so. And so that's what we're looking at Joseph. Just a couple quick backstory on who Joseph is, because we're going to jump right into his life. So to understand who Joseph is, just a quick overview. So in the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible, Genesis just means origins or beginning. So it's the beginning of the world. It's the beginning of God's dealing with his people. In the book of Genesis, you have God creating everything. All right, that's where it came from. You have sin and evil entering the world. All right, that's how it got messed up. You have God's reaction to it. You have a flood. And then you have the world descending into evil. And so then you have God starting to act, starting to plan out salvation for the world. And so to do so, he decides that he's going to create a people amongst this broken world that are going to embody and belong to him. And they're going to live out what it looks like to do the two greatest commandments, to love God with everything you have, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So to start this people on earth, he chooses one man named Abraham. Abraham and his wife Sarah are old. He promises, though, that they'll have a child and they'll have all these descendants. Eventually, they're granted Isaac. Isaac gets married. Isaac has 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. God chooses that Jacob is the son that's going to carry this promised people through his lineage. And so Jacob is going to go on from there. Jacob gets his name renamed by God to Israel. So just a heads up, as we're reading, if you see Jacob or Israel, same dude. It's going to call them both. It's going to call him the same, or both names. So now you have Jacob or Israel, and then Jacob ends up marrying 4 women and having 12 sons. It's a long story. He wanted to marry one, Here we are, though, he's got 4. Doesn't go well for him, but the thing that God uses that for is he ends up with these 12 sons who are going to be these kind of cornerstones of God's people. One of those sons is Joseph, okay? So who Joseph is, he's one of 12 sons. He's the oldest son of the woman that Jacob really loved, that he wanted to marry. And he's going to be the one who we're really going to follow here for several chapters at the end of Genesis. So this is a key story in the story of how God deals with his people. But you have Joseph, this child of a promise, part of this people of God, one of 12 sons. That's who we're following today. And today what we're going to be looking at in terms of triumph is actually nothing big, right? If you know the story of Joseph, or you will know it, there's some big obstacles he faces. Today we're looking at what does it look like to triumph over bitterness. Feels little. And yet what we're going to see is it has big consequences or big opportunities of grace. So we're looking at a triumph over bitterness today as we kick off Joseph's story in Genesis 37. And just a heads up, I could just tell you the story, but I think it's better when we read it. So we're going to read some chunks of text, but it's an interesting story, so I don't think it'll be hard to follow along. All right, so here we have Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 1. All right. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. All right, so Jacob, at this point, he's one of those descendants, Jacob or Israel. He's the 12 sons. So we're following his family. He lives in this land of his father's sojourning. So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they did not have a home. They were on the move. And then here's the generations of Jacob. So here's the story of Jacob and his family, his descendants. Joseph, who we're looking at, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. All right, so we just jump right in here. So you got Joseph, right? And so he's 17 at this point. He's a shepherd of his family. He's pasturing a flock. And at some point when he's a boy, he's pasturing with some of his brothers from some of the other mothers. Again, that's the whole situation. And he brings a bad report of them to his father. So he tells them, I don't know if they're slacking, they're not treating the animals well, I'm not sure. We don't know. But he doesn't speak well of them. He says, hey, Dad, just so you know, my brothers are not doing what they're supposed to be. And then we're told this. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons because he was the son of his old age. So right off the bat, we're told this Joseph, he's the favorite kid, right? So AJ had us talking. Maybe you were the favorite. Maybe you could pick out who the favorite in your family is. Hopefully there's not this kind of disparity. Trust me, if you feel like you were not loved, parents do love their kids, all of them. But what's really interesting is we're told here, part of it is because of it's the son of his old age. So there's something sometimes when you're older, more tender, you're not as fiery, that you have this different, maybe softness. But also think about, this is the oldest son from the woman he loves. So Jacob ends up getting married to 4 women, but the one who he loves, this is the firstborn of that woman. One thing we'll find out later is Joseph, next week, will be described in one part as being handsome in form and appearance. That phrase, handsome or beautiful in form and appearance, those words in the original text, are found one other place in the entire Bible to describe Joseph's mom. So there's something about Joseph's appearance that even resembles his mom. There's something that has been passed down. So you have this man who has this son who resembles his mom who he loves. Joseph's mom at this point has passed away. She died in childbirth for their second son. And so his late wife, he has this son by his late wife who resembles her, this son of his old age, and Joseph becomes the favorite. Now that's not saying it's a good thing or bad thing. That's just with the story that we're told. This is what happens. And so he goes on, Jacob does, and makes Joseph this robe of many colors, right? So this is where you see this many depictions of this multicolored robe, this vibrant, this beautiful display of Jacob's love for his son, that he wants to robe him with all of his love. It's not enough that you just look like a shepherd. I want you to look beautiful and wonderful so the whole world can see how much I love you. Problem is when you have 12 sons and you do that to one of them, it's not going to go well. Right? And just imagine, some of you, maybe you felt like you weren't the favorite child. I don't know. Can you imagine, though, there's a big difference between, like, man, I feel like my parents love that sibling more than me. And there's a difference than when you turn to the parent saying, all right, here's my favorite. Look how beautiful he is. And so his brothers see this, and they see how much their father loves Joseph more than all of them, and they hate Joseph for it. And they can't speak peacefully to him, right? They're just so filled with anger and bitterness and rage. Because they're looking, what did they do, right? Born to the wrong woman? I don't know. They don't look like the one that their father loved. And so they're just thrust in the situation where they're not the favorite children, and so they hate Joseph for it. They cannot speak peacefully to him, and this is what they're dealing with. Now, to highlight a couple things, again, so this is highlighting right off the bat. We're only 3 verses in, and they want it to be clear. Joseph is the favorite, and then the reaction to that is how much they hate Joseph for it. They can't stand him, right? So moving on, Joseph's going to have dreams. So Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Oh, great, so this doesn't go well. Going even further into the hole. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. So hey guys, I had this dream, I got to tell you about it. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So there are some dreams, there will be a lot of dreams in Joseph that need an interpretation. I don't know if you ever wake up and you're like, geez, does that mean something? Like, what in the world? Like, I saw my kindergarten teacher and she was eating sushi and I was running late for work and trying to make sense of it all, right? This is a dream that needs no interpretation. Hey guys, we were out in the field and we were collecting wheat, and guess what? Your wheat bowed to my wheat. They're like, we got the interpretation. Okay, we got it. But the result of this, right, so he tells them this, and they hate him even more, and it specifically highlights 2 things. They hate him for his dreams and for his words. So he had this dream. I guess you could debate, if you felt like you had a dream from God, would you want to tell it to your siblings? I mean, they're your closest people. Hey, I really fucking need to tell somebody? I don't know. But regardless, the result is he has these dreams and he feels the need to share it. So they hate him for the dream and for his words. The way he shares the story, the way he talks to them, I don't know. But the result is he has this dream, they hate him more. So they hated him for being the favorite. Now he's telling them, hey, I'm having all these dreams. I had this dream that you guys bow down to me. They hate him more for it. He's going to have another dream. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Can you just pause there? You're on the field, and your brother who you hate, who has this crazy dream, is like, hey guys, I got another dream. Like, don't you dare say a word. But he tells them anyways. And behold, I've dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Right, how many brothers does he have? 11. Oh, convenient. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So his father actually calls him out at this point, right? Because, all right, great, you're the favorite child, but when you start as a kid saying, like, all right, Dad, I had a dream, you're going to bow down to me. Like, all right, then it's one way to lose some points. So he has a second dream, right? And now not only are his brothers bowing down to him, but now he has this dream that even his parents are going to bow down to him. His brothers become even more jealous. His father, interestingly, keeps the saying in mind. He doesn't just completely dismiss it. He's mad. He rebukes him, calls him out, and yet he still is willing to think about it. So this is just the setup for the story, right? Now, I just want to just point out, it is very understandably why these brothers are so mad. These brothers, just speaking-wise, it just feels like they have every right to be bitter. If there's somebody, yeah, I get it. All right, so your father chose your brother over you. He loves him. He showers him with this beautiful robe. How cool. Kind of dismisses you maybe. And then this brother, he's got all these crazy dreams that he's going to be better than you. You're going to bow down to him as if it wasn't enough. And I think this is one of the first things about bitterness. Because as we look at bitterness, we're going to think about Joseph, but we start off with a contrast. Because we're started with the bitterness of his brothers. The people who have a reason to be bitter are the 11 brothers that he has. And the thing about bitterness is that if you want to find a reason to be bitter, I guarantee you can find one. There is not somebody who can't find something to be bitter about. And if you want to be bitter, you can justify it every time. And I'm not saying that whatever reason you might find is invalid or isn't true. But what I'm saying is bitterness will always have something you can grab onto. There's always in your life, living in a fallen world, living in a broken world, you can always find somebody who slighted you, somebody who betrayed you, somebody who hurt you, somebody who let you down, the way the world didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Now, part of their issue is with Joseph, their brother. Part of their issue is with their father. He's the one who's got them into this mess in the beginning. And in life, it's really easy to be bitter against people. I can't believe you said that one time. I can't believe that you would possibly do that to me. I counted on you and you hurt me. But there's also occasions to be bitter against God. Father, why the heck did all I wanted was to be married and have a family, and those people have it and I don't? Father, all I want is just things to be stable for a little bit, and it just feels like one more thing keeps getting heaped on me. And so our bitterness can go outward, but it just as easily goes upward. Because God is the one who's ultimately given you this life. That doesn't mean you haven't had a role in messing it up or anything, but part of the issue lies with the Father in this situation. And if you're looking for a reason to be bitter, I guarantee you can find it. It doesn't take long. And if you are bitter right now, there's probably someone or something out there that when that topic comes up, you just feel a little tense, feel frustrated. And so bitterness is sometimes a daily temptation. Right? So there are big things in life that we have to overcome, and sometimes it's just the daily idea that, man, I don't feel like I've gotten my fair shake in life. I feel like people have done me wrong. I feel like God has done me wrong, whatever it might be, big or little. But something's not right. So bitterness, for the brother's sake, it's understandable. And what's happened to them, that doesn't invalidate. It's not to say like, oh, you guys should just be happy. No. But what we're going to see is they have a crux here where they can do something with this. They can handle it a few different ways. And we're going to look at what happens when they don't do anything with this and they stew on it. What happens when you hold on to bitterness? Because all of us could find a reason to be bitter, but the consequences are severe when we do. So moving on to the story, here's what happens next. Right? His brothers, they hate him. He's the favorite child, Joseph is. His brothers are all mad. So you have this day. All right, so just someday. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel, that's Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he, that is Jacob, said to him, Joseph, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. So now you have Jacob, Joseph's dad, saying, "Hey, go check on your brothers for me. Can you go out to them, go see how they're doing?" And then you have this. They, that is the brothers, saw him, that is Joseph, from afar. And before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard this, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Pause right there. What happens to their bitterness? Boils over. They've had enough. And so one day, an opportunity arises. They're out in the fields, they're pasturing the flocks, and they see Joseph all by himself from afar. Right? This is back before you could just call up, like, "Yeah, I'm going to be there in 30 seconds. They see Joseph coming. They have plenty of time to talk and plan, and they decide, you know what? We've had enough of it. Dad's favorite kid, the loved child. He thinks he's going to rule over us. Let's kill him. So they conspire. They're going to kill him, throw him into one of the pits, hide his body, and then just tell their dad that an animal must have devoured him. Right? This is a a time and place where you might just have like wild beasts out in the field, so maybe one just attacked him, killed him. And look at just even how they refer to him, right? Here comes this dreamer. I was once, somebody had once just made the observation, they said, once you give somebody a nickname, like in a derogatory sense, like there's not much hope that at least as long as you're using that nickname, that you're going to show them much grace, right? Here comes that cheater, right? Here comes that tattletale, right? Once you've labeled them that way, and that's who they are to you, it's hard to overcome. So they conspired this plan. Now Reuben, he's the oldest brother. Go oldest, just kidding. Reuben makes his fair share of mistakes too, but he has a moment of conscience and decides, I'm going to try and save Joseph, and so he doesn't want to kill him. So let's not take his life. Instead, Reuben said to them, shed no blood, throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might, so that's what he said, right? So don't lay a hand on him, just throw him in this pit, right? That'll leave him for dead, basically. Then we're told, Reuben's plan is that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So Reuben's plan is like, hey, don't kill him, just throw him in the pit, and then Reuben's thinking like, later I'll come back and I'll save him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So they see Joseph, they strip him of his clothes, right? 11-on-1, it's tough to overcome. I don't know how strong Joseph was, but he probably didn't stand a chance. And they throw him into this pit, right? And then what do they do next? They sit down to eat. I just love that. I don't know. It's such a weird picture to me. I can't imagine like taking your own like blood relative, beating him, throwing him into a pit, and be like, all right, did anyone bring sandwiches? Like, let's eat some food. On a much more, dark note, so this is all we're told here. Like, this to me is just such an interesting picture that they just sat down to eat at this point. Later in the story of Joseph, his brothers will be reflecting on this experience, and they'll recount how he was begging to get out. I can't imagine what it's like eating while your brother's begging, like, please don't leave me here, please get me out. But that's the picture. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Ishmael was a break off of the family, so he belongs to a different people. They got some ties. So there's people of Ishmael, his descendants, coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, and on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit it is if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? So Judah's like, wow, we got rid of our brother. We could make this day even better, right? We could make a profit off of this endeavor. So in verses 27-20, he says, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. So here you have them thinking, Judah's like, hey, we could kill him. He's our brother. That wouldn't be good. But if we sell him, we don't have to deal with him, and we can make a profit off of it. We still accomplish the same thing. And so they sell him for 20 pieces of silver, and so Joseph goes down to Egypt. He's being sold off. I just want to pause here. So the first chunk, right, you have this setting where it's very understandable why these brothers are so bitter. And then what you have in the next chunk is what happens when they harbor that bitterness. When you hold on to bitterness, it hardens you. It takes your heart and it calcifies it, hardens it. And it's one of those things that we justify to ourselves, so we replay these things over and over again. It's like a bug bite, right? There's an itch. I'm so frustrated. So you itch it, and then what happens? It just keeps itching, and it gets worse, and it blisters. Now, I'm not saying that if you harbor bitterness, you're going to end up selling your brother into slavery in Egypt. Highly doubt it. But the Bible is clear that when you hang on to anger and bitterness, it never goes well. Only bad things come from it. And again, that doesn't invalidate the reasons why you might be bitter. It doesn't mean that thing that was done to you didn't happen or it didn't matter or wasn't evil. It doesn't mean that the thing that was said to you or the circumstances of life don't seem fair. I'm not saying any of that. But often, you can't control that. These 11 brothers, no matter how hard they try, can't change their father's love for their brother any way they want. They just can't, right? They can't, without taping over his mouth, stop their brother from saying, hey, I have these dreams that you're going to bow down to me. So ultimately what happens is, while they might have been wronged, they're the ones who have to deal with the bitterness and decide, what am I going to do with this? And when you harbor that, when you hang on to it, it is only going to lead to bad things. Bad things towards others. It's going to lash out. How many times have you just been like slowly, like little by little, been frustrated with somebody and you just keeps building, and then finally you snap. And you pull out that one thing that you know is going to cut so deep. How many times do you get so frustrated that eventually you're just like, I want nothing to do with this. I just cut this person out or forsake God, whatever it is. If you hang on to the bitterness, it's only going to harden you. It's only going to lead to evil. This is why the Bible will talk in ways like, don't let the sun go down on your anger. It's not good to sit there with it. This is also why, like in the Psalms, often the wicked are depicted as despising schemes on their beds, right? The picture of them laying on their bed, just thinking like, oh, if I get a chance to stick it to them. Joseph's brothers, again, I get it. But hanging on to it, stewing on it, doing nothing with it, only leads to terrible things. To the fact that they're willing to, right? Maybe we shouldn't kill him. He's our own flesh and blood. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't sell him into slavery. Maybe you shouldn't have beat him and stripped him in the first place. But our minds get clouded, our hearts get hardened when we hang on to this bitterness. And so the start of Joseph's story is a hard warning not to hang on to bitterness, not to sit in it, not to dwell in it, not to let it rule our lives. Some of us know those people, and maybe we are one of those people, who spend their whole life bitter. And you see them towards the end of life, and all that they can come up with when they're talking is just all of the different things that have been done to them, all the wrongs that they've experienced, right? And it's hard. It's hard to look at somebody like that because they just feel so calloused and turned off from the world, so turned inwardly on themselves. And the danger is for all of us, if we sit with bitterness, of doing the exact same. And here's the hard thing too, is the more bitter and hard we are, the harder it is to receive grace. I was listening to a conversation on a podcast years ago, and somebody was really trying to make the case that they have been sinned against in their life more than they have sinned. I won't disagree. I don't know. I haven't seen their life. But the idea was, right, what's the idea of forgiveness for somebody who feels like they've been wronged more than they've wronged, right? Forgiveness. They're the ones who should apologize, right? So even the act of bitterness, it changes us and it prevents us from hearing the good news of Jesus for us. So there's a warning. Don't hang on to bitterness. So the story is going to continue here. Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." Right? Hey, Dad, we found this robe covered in blood. Is this Joseph's? I don't know. We just found it in the field. And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn into pieces." So in his father's eyes, his son is dead. Their plan goes according to plan. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. So just a quick aside. So now Jacob has a chance to figure out what to do with his bitterness, right? He just lost a son. His son, in his mind, has been slaughtered and killed. Notice that, again, his children are like, "Hey, Dad, can we comfort you?" And he says, "No, I want to mourn till I die," basically, right? So his mind at this point is set on, I'm gonna live in this for the rest of life. It doesn't matter if my kids need me. It doesn't matter anything else. This is what I'm focused on. And so then we're going to follow now is we're going to shift gears. This has incorporated the whole family dynamics. From here on in the story, what we'll be looking at next week and beyond is just Joseph for a while. Joseph's the one who's now sold into Egypt to this man named Potiphar, who's an officer in Pharaoh, so high up, captain of the guard. And so now Joseph's going to have an opportunity, right? So his brothers had every reason to be bitter. His father has an opportunity to be bitter. And now Joseph's going to have an opportunity to be bitter, right? How's he going to respond? This is the thing about bitterness, is whenever you have a disagreement among people, usually everybody has something that they've been wronged in this whole situation. Not always, right? His brothers, well, you were the favorite, blah, blah, blah. And Joseph, well, you sold me into slavery, right? Everybody. So the question is, how is Joseph going to respond to this? In this part of the story, we're not told how Joseph's going to respond. And so to know how to respond to bitterness, we're going to have to look elsewhere. And here's one of the beautiful things about Joseph's story, is that Joseph is a powerful figure in the Old Testament, and he's part of this whole history and story of God working salvation in this world. But he also prepares the world for a far greater person to come. Because when you look at Joseph's story, the parallels between the people of Joseph and the people of Jesus are startling. Now, this is interesting because Scripture never specifically says, like, Jesus is like Joseph in these ways. Never once. And yet, when you look at Joseph's story, you have this one who is sent by his father to his brothers to check on, see if they're well. His brothers, in turn, hate him. They devise plans to kill him. They strip him of his clothes, and they sell him for silver. Fast forward. This man named Jesus. He's the Son of God. He's eternal. He's the eternal Word before the foundations of the world. The world's a bad place, and God sends him. Go check on your brothers and your sisters in this world. Go make things right. How's Jesus received? His brothers hate him. They devise plans, they scheme. We're told all the time in the Gospels that the religious leaders of the day, they would gather together and devise plans on how to kill him. They eventually capture him. He's sold for pieces of silver by one of his own followers. He's stripped of his clothes, and he's killed. The story of Joseph prepares us for the story of Jesus. And the story of Jesus is one who, like all of us, would have every reason to be bitter. What did Jesus do to anyone? What was done to him? He would touch people, and they'd be healed. In turn, he was struck on the head with staffs. He would come to people, and they'd receive sight. How was he thanked? People spat on him and mocked him. I just imagine Jesus on the cross. People are still, while he's dying, people are still saying, hey, he said he'd save other people. Let him save himself. Let him come down. How easy would it be to say, you know what? I'm done with all this. All I came was to make things right. And this is the things I get. Jesus could have just snapped his fingers, come down from the cross, struck everyone dead, just said, you know what, forsake this world. And instead, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he gave his life, gave any opportunity for bitterness, and he rose from the dead, so that all who believe in him might have new life. All who believe in him might not have to succumb to bitterness and scorn and pain, but have the promise of eternal life already now and in the life to come. And so when we experience bitterness in this world, because here's the reality, with emotions, you can't control them, right? They just happen. But you can control what to do with it. And so you can harbor bitterness, you can let it harden your heart, or you can turn to the one who chose not to be bitter, but chose to be merciful, loving, and forgiving. The one who looked at you and all of the things that you've done to other people to give them reasons to be bitter, and said, I'm going to wash that all clean. I'm not going to hold it against you on account of my sacrifice and my resurrection. The funny thing, too, is sometimes as Christians, we feel like we need to pretend that we're not bothered by things. So when we're frustrated, right? Like, God, why in the world did you do this to me? Right? You don't have to pretend that that's not in your heart. God already sees it. And actually, what the Scripture tells us to do is actually say it to God. Pray it to him. God, you promised that you're with me. I can't find you. Right? Because God can handle it. He can handle the frustration and the anger and all of it. And it's in praying it to him, holding to his promises. And there's other aspects as brothers and sisters. We get to say, you know, I'm struggling with this. I'm holding on to bitterness to this person. Can you help me? Can you pray for me? We're in this together. But the goal is always to move away from hanging on to that bitterness, because it'll only hurt you. It'll only harden you. It'll only lead to sin. And instead look to the one, the better Joseph, who forsook bitterness so he could forgive you. Look to him, and in doing so, let us triumph over bitterness. In Jesus' name, amen.